Hi class, for your next project you're going to be making a Rube Goldberg machine. Rube Goldberg. It's interesting, you don't need to get too worried and freaked out about it because it's an interesting machine. You've probably seen one before in some way or the other. They're in popular culture quite a bit. The phrase Rube Goldberg machine is actually they're named after an actual person named Rube Goldberg. He was best known for his cartoons that depicted complicated gadgets performing a simple task, and that is basically what you're going to be creating. He won a lot of prizes for his illustrations, political cartooning, and importantly, he was the first president and founding member of the Cartoon Society, and they have an award named after him, the Reuben Award. Um, his whole name is Reuben Goldberg. How are these type of machines art, and what do we mean by a Rube Goldberg machine? Let's look at him first. These are the type of machines that he would have made. They have an idea about them that's like functional and absurd. This is a cartoon that he would have written. So you have this each of the steps. As you walk past the cobbler shop, the hook strikes suspending the boot. See, so A, B, C goes to D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. So the end of it all is so that it pulls down the window shade on which is written, "USAP, mail that letter," which is to get him to realize that he needs to mail the letter. So all of this is if a guy couldn't remember to mail this letter while he was walking down the street, the hook would hit the boot for the cobbler shop, would make the football go in here, and then it would continue to hit this. The water would hit this bird that would do this, try to get the worm that would drop this reminder. So it's functional and absurd in a way, absurd functionality. It's not for the purpose of like a cup holds water that you drink. There's a lot of functionality that's exactly as it should be. It's something made to do what it's supposed to do as efficiently as possible. These machines are not that. They're about doing something in an interesting way that has a chain reaction, cause and effect. So how is this art? How is motion art? Well, there's a long-standing history of kinetic art and motion art going way back. Um, Kinetic art is a manifestation of the fascination with motion, which defines a whole swath of modern art, really. It even goes all the way back to Impressionism. This is Impression Sunrise by Monet, and it has an idea of sensing movement and light and the play of light and movement, as well as this Cubist piece by Brock called Nude Descending a Staircase, so seeing it from multiple directions in painting. So it's coming out of this whole idea of depicting time and motion, but doing it in an actual way. We get other types of works that are mechanical, and some of them, like op art, is a visual version that makes you think it's moving. But it comes out of these early Dada and constructivist movements of the 1910s. This is Marcel Duchamp's, he's a Dada artist, so it's actually a movable bicycle wheel. Dada was critiquing the idea of machines and machinery and also society in general at this time after World War One, like the way in which these things could enslave humans and the way people were affected by the war and things. Constructivism is more of a sort of idea of how it would be great, and embracing the idea that the machine could integrate itself into everyday life, taking on a central role in like a utopian sense and building the future. So kind of two sides of the same coin. We get a lot of different pieces from early time with light and space and movement and shadow being a part of it. This is by Maholinagi doing that. And then I think a lot of people have heard of Alexander Calder, the inventor of the mobile. This is one of his early pieces. And movement in the space, the painted pieces of aluminum moving on iron with the currents of the air is part of this whole piece that's constantly changing. And so change and all this is reflected in the cultural climate. Nowadays, we take machines for granted so much that it's almost like, oh yeah, well, they're not so interesting to us in a way. We use them so much, but this is not always the case for much of human history. Things like microwaves didn't exist that long ago, and cellular phones and typewriters and even copy machines. All these things we take for granted. Well, there was a time where those things weren't there, and people were interested in critiquing our relationship to them, but also the ideas of movement and time as an artistic media, um, to reflect the importance of machines in the modern world and to explore the nature of vision. Also, you could think about this, especially with like this being time and light, and then vision, how things move in space, coming all the way back to that, and then time and light and vision in space, how they're all connecting together in the history of art. So we get some interesting pieces by people like Tingley, John Tingley. He gained prominence in these in early machines that sort of destroyed themselves and did things, and then he ended up doing these monumental machines that kind of had a purposelessness to them. They were massive and they didn't really do anything. This one's called Eureka, after the Greek for Eureka. I found it. So it's interesting. He's critiquing modernism and the way in which things develop. And it has a sort of beauty to it that's almost like steampunk. So why would we deal with absurd functionality? You can make something that's like purposefully not, it works, it operates, but it doesn't really have a function. The function is it for it to be purposeless. And then you could do one that has actually a function, like a Rube Goldberg cartoon drawing has a real thing, but it's absurd. Why would we do something that's absurd? This is an interesting idea. It's absurd to have a bicycle wheel on a stool, right? Why would we do something that's absurd for its own sake? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and we could go on and on about them, but one of them is to talk about the nature of material, chain reaction, the world around us, how we forget and what we think about, the way in which things work and move and go. There's an interesting chain reaction Goldberg 30-minute sculpture by Fishley and Weiss, Weiss, called The Way Things Go, which is about all these material interactions. So how does this relate to sculpture? One of them is through material. This is a piece by Cesar. It's actually automobile parts crushed into a cube, which is really interesting because you have 1966. We had other types of art going on in cubes. You've probably heard of a lot of modernist things with the discrete object and perfectly manufactured site works that were perfect cubes. This guy's decided to do it out of almost like junk art, it would be called also, to make these cubes minimalism out of old materials. But it comes into a conversation of material when you're having things do what they can do in the world. He also, Tingley, had these self-destroying sculpture. This is a fragment of one from New York where he built it in a sculpture garden and then it destroyed itself, which I think is a lot about talking about this idea going way back to Dada, where things are naturally being questioned and their functionality and what they could do in the world is being questioned, how machines operate and what our goals are. I think another part of this that would be interesting to think about is material reactions. So fire is one, obviously. The materials of compression and how things are, what they can do, like what metal can do. Well, another one that you could think about would be something like carbon, like baking soda and vinegar creating expansion, and it creates and fills a balloon, for example, and that could be part of a sculpture. I did a sculpture once when I was in undergrad about this idea, using this to kind of ruin a pump, and it kept going in a cycle. So I think this is something that I find interesting. Chemical reactions, that's already part of the world around us. And by making things like that, you can talk about the nature of the world, who we are in the world, and where maybe things are going and how things are working. So to make a sculpture like this, you have to have an objective. You start with the end in mind. And there's all kinds of purposes you could do, but here's some possible ideas. Pop a balloon, answer your phone, open a door, record a video, open a book, throw a paper airplane, right? It kind of has a way in which talking about something banal and regular and everyday in the world through this machine points out the obviousness of it and the regularness of life around us. It highlights it in a way. And something like answering your phone that you may do thousands of times in a day, or a text message 100 times, probably not thousands, hopefully, but becomes something that's like on focal point through this, right? It becomes something that you're putting a magnifying glass. It's more than just a straight up chain reaction, because you could have a bunch of things like dominoes falling over and then that's it. It has to have a purpose, so an objective, not just to be a chain reaction. But you want to think about what things do, what roles, what knocks things over, what can turn something on. Pulleys, all these type of machines, simple machines, are a huge part of this. So if you've taken physics class before, if you haven't, don't worry. There's 6 simple machines. A lever, which can force going down, can make a load go up or even fly like a catapult. You can pull things up with pulleys. You have a wheel and an axle, which can do a lot of things. Of course, part of it is turning something like a car and going forward and carrying a load, but also it has the ability to move things around in a circle from a fixed point. It has something to revolve around it and be stationary on a shaft, the axle. You have inclined planes, which could allow things to go up and down, like putting a box on a car. See, this is interesting. Wheel and axle, like I'm saying, not just a car, but like something like a doorknob. You have wedges, which are an axe, which is an object that tapers to a thin edge, pushing its way through something, stopping something. You have a screw as well, which is interesting. With wheels and axles, I want to bring up the idea that also gears are an important form of that. And pulleys, are connected to that with belts and gears. Screws are usually circular, like a cylinder with a continuous plane. Helical rib is actually what it's called, and they can fasten things together or they can modify motion. So there's all kinds of ways you can play with that, but you want to think about what knocks what over. And transferring energy is a huge part of this. So when you pick something up and you leave it to be ready to fall down later, the energy is stored in that gravity is going to take it down. So you can transfer energy in 4 main ways: mechanically by the action of a force, electrically by a current, radiation by light or sound waves, and heating. So conduction, convection, or radiation. You could think about gasoline engines heat what? Gas, which is an oil product, which blows up and creates a mechanical action. The cylinder goes up and the force goes, and then that translates into motion through the machinery that uses a lot of these type of machines. A lever, basically a piston. You have pulleys and belts that drive things, and wheels and axles. So you can think about how they interact with each other. You're going to mostly probably be dealing with mechanical energy transfer by the action of force through the movement of parts, motion or position. Even this kid hitting a drum, this is mechanical because the energy is vibrating to our ears. So this relates in an interesting way to physics again in the 3 laws of motion. Newton's laws of inertia, F equals ma, and action reaction. Okay, I don't expect you to memorize these or anything, but I just want to make you think about how the first law of inertia is objects at rest will remain at rest unless acted on by a force, and an object in motion continues in motion at the same speed in the same direction unless acted on by an unbalanced force. So this means you can have something resting and the force has to hit it, like toppling over, and it'll keep moving unless you stop it, right? You can imagine that, something in space flying for a really long time without gravity unless something hits it. And then the second law is about acceleration. The acceleration of an object as produced by a force is directly proportional to the magnitude of the force in the same direction and inversely proportional to the mass of the object. You're like, what the heck is he talking about? But you already actually understand this because you use it in every day. If you have, for example, something like a turkey baster and you fill it with water, if you hold the baster so the bulb is holding the force inside and let it go, then it sucks up the water, right? That's basically, if you had a baster and you hold it in the force, you're holding it in, you let it go, then it pulls the water in. Now, if it's full of water and you hit it really quick, then the water will come out really quick, right? And blast out. If you hit it just barely with a little force, it'll dribble out. It's the same idea, okay? And then action and reaction. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. This is interesting. If you think about a frog sitting on a lily pad and it hops to a nearby lily pad, what happens to the first lily pad? You're sitting there standing, you can see that it pushes it away from the frog who hopped, right? It's the same idea. Why are we talking about this? Why are we going into such detail about Newtonian physics? Why are we doing this? Because I want you to think about how things move and work. Boom, a force. Inertia keeps going until something stops it. It pulls. I need you to think about how this relates to your machine and the simple kind of things you could do and use. Things flying up in the air, pulling something, a wheel moving, something going down, a plane, or screwing or unscrewing through air, okay? So you want to work backwards from your objective. So let's take popping a balloon as an example. You need something sharp to hit the balloon, or the balloon has to hit something sharp. So that your first step would be, you think to yourself, okay, this is what you need to do. I want to pop a balloon. That's it. You can pick any kind of basic thing, but that's a good thing to pick. So you have a balloon and you want to pop it. So in this case, I'm going to say a thumbtack hits the balloon. So I need a tack to hit the balloon. How am I going to do that? Well, one way is I can do it so that it's attached to a piece of wood that is on a big lever, it's like a, what do we call that? Fulcrum. And something has to fall down to get it to attach. So it has to come from there and hit that. Okay? So what's going to fall on this lever to make it hit the balloon? Oh, and also something has to hold the balloon, right? So this is the kind of basic sketch I want you to think about doing. So I'm going to have, I said here, I didn't say it, a ruler with a thumbtack glued to it swing towards the balloon. And then I need something to hold the ruler in place. There's that. And then I need something to release it to hit the balloon. A button. I could do it even with force, like a rubber band holding it back, or so it's like a mouse trap. But let's do it like something's going to roll down a plane. Up here, a ball is going to roll down the plane, and that's going to fall at the spot where the ruler is, and that's going to make this hit the balloon. Okay, so then what's going to topple the ball? We have 1, 2, 3 steps right now. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm going to do something up here that's going to swing and hit the ball. So it's going to go boom. I'm going to put a boot here to swing and hit the ball. So the boot has to come from up here. So the boot has to have a place where it's held, and then it swings down. Maybe I could use something like a fan or another lever. I'll just do it where it's up here and there's a lever and it's like a pulley. It pulls on it. So that's going to swing the boot down from here to hit the bowling ball or some kind of smaller ball, to roll down a plane, to hit the other side of the fulcrum, to pop this. Okay, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. I need one more step for this project requires you to have at least 5. This technically 1, 2, 3. Oh, I only have 3. 1, 2, 3 steps. So I have to do 2 more. Okay, so you get the idea. If I have something to pull this, I can do what will make something pull a rope to release it, right? What could do that? Well, I could attach this to my dog if I wanted. This is a bad drawing of a dog. And the dog will be left there until I release a treat for it over here to come and get. And then when it does, it'll pull the string and the string will break away from the dog so it doesn't ruin the whole machine, and release it. And then what could I do to make the dog go over there? There's another step over here. Me with the treat. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I need one more. I think instead of me with the treat, I have to have something drop the treat to the dog, so I can do 5. So here's something. I'm going to do a book with my cell phone buzzing. That's going to knock the treat down to the dog. The dog's going to run and it's going to pop a bolt. And so the dog's going to grab the treat, pull the boot, which is going to knock the ball, which is going to drop it onto the other side of the lever, the fulcrum, and it's going to pop the balloon, right? So this is what you have to think about when you're doing this, working your way through it. You're going to draw to visualize the steps. These are drawings from Jean Tinguely's work. So it doesn't have to be the type of drawings that are like perfectly rendered, but you probably need them to make sense. I was doing that really quickly, so I could come back and clean it up a little bit and think it through. But these are notational schematic type of drawings to help you think about chain reactions. And then when you actually build it, you have to experiment with your ideas through trial and error by setting up the pieces and adjusting them like you would do if you had dominoes knocking over. You have to move them. When I was in my illustration with the dog, I have to play and see how far it can move. Probably not good to have an animal, honestly, because then that could really mess it all up if it doesn't do what it's supposed to. But I have to wait until I can get the boot set up in the right spot so it swings and hits. And I might have to set it up 5 or 6 times to get it to work, right? The other important part of this project is you need to capture the moment. You need to document your work through photographs, and you can do a video if you want. So capturing through photographs, capturing through video, and drawings are part of the art. The attempts of the process are part of the art too. This is a piece called Blizzard Ball Sail by David Hammons. It's a performance art piece where he has this blanket set up with these snowballs and he's selling them in New York City on the street by size. And it's a funny thing to talk about value and peddling your wares in the street, like what happens in New York, and also the act of commerce and transaction between artists and public and collectors. But the work was what he was doing in 1983, but it also was the imagery. This became part of the work because this is how he communicates about what he did, and he sold and people collected the photographs, right? So the documentation is also the art. Due to the performative quality of this, the documentation on the actions of your sculpture become integral part of the art, because if you no longer have the Rube Goldberg machine set up, what do you have left? You have the photographs and the video. So those are part of the art. They're just like these drawings. They were never made, but if you did a drawing like this and then made it, the drawing would also be part of that. So there's a relationship between the two things that become intertwined, where the art is the documentation, the photo and the video, as well as the object that you made originally. And if you kept the objects and kept them set up, then it would be a sculpture as well. But you could think about this in a lot of the videos that you watch. They probably don't keep you're going to watch some videos in the module. They don't necessarily keep those pieces as a sculpture, but you could, like Jean Tinguely did, He kept, and part of that one even that got destroyed was kept. So you can keep it, but also the documentation often lasts longer. So how do you start? You start with the end, identifying the simple task you want to achieve. You make a plan, which is a drawing, by brainstorming a series of actions that will complete your task. You got to gather materials. You can use anything almost, like I was talking about. But here's some ideas: dominoes, fans, pieces of pipe, magnets, duct tape, marbles, cups or bowls, miniature toys, paper towel tubes, and string. Regular type of objects work really well. You build it piece by piece. So it's going to make perfect through practice. You're not going to expect that it should work the first time. You're going to have to try it with trial and error, adjust your materials, and keep at it. And then you document it. Use a camera to photograph the steps. Do a video if you would like. I would really like it if you did a video. Especially a good idea to document the process too. And then especially before you set it off and you think it's really going to work, take a picture of each step and then do a video live if you can. That would be really amazing. Part of this is the idea of speculation. There are people who do work that's like impossible projects or really large projects. These are some people that work under the moniker United Catalyst. That's a collaboration, and they have this project that's about creating this prayer wheel in orbit in space. This isn't necessarily art that fails. Maybe John Tinglay's art that fails, but there's an idea of things that you're speculating about what could happen. The whole project is about speculation. Why did I bring up speculation? Because this is the idea of the plan and drawing. Coming into the absurdist idea of speculation. These never happened, but you're actually going to try to do it. You're going to plan something, you're going to speculate it in the drawing process, and then you're actually going to try to set up, you're going to document it as once you set it up, you're going to actually see if you can make it happen and adjust it if you need to so that you end up with a finished Rube Goldberg machine. So that'll be really interesting. I'm going to show you the module in Canvas so you can see that there's a number of videos I want you to watch about this as well. So in your module, you have your project sheet where you turn in your work and describes the project. You're going to have a number of different videos about these machines. This one has a really simple one that a kid does with at his house. He uses like cars and car tracks and some dominoes. There's a really cool one, a tabletop one that uses magnets and basic pieces of wood and ball bearings or marbles. That's pretty awesome. You've got one here that's pretty more well-known one and pretty complex about lemonade, and it uses a bunch of chain reactions with simple things. You got the OK Go music video that's pretty awesome with a lot of things dropping. It's got music from the band OK Go. It was a music video. So these are used in culture quite a lot. This one's interesting. The Harlem Globetrotters worked with, I believe, Georgia Tech to make a big one in their space. More complex ones. This is some famous examples from animation, so animated versions and live action ones. There's an interesting relationship in this work to illustration and drawing because it's the idea that's kind of funny and inventive. And there's some of these a lot in popular culture, like different movies have them. Live action movies like The Goonies to open a gate, and then also like animated sequences. So this is pretty cool. It kind of makes you think more about where you've already seen this before. And this last page has different kinetic and functional sculpture videos to watch that talk to you more about the history of the ideas of functionality and movement. There's some of these ones by John Tingley. You can see these works in progress. There's a Marcel Duchamp, Alexander Calder, Mobile. This one's a performative one by Hilia Oiticica, Something You Wear and Move In. This is like a more real machine one where the guy breaks down and destroys all of his possessions through a machine. And these ones are more like these kind of crazy creature-esque ones that work through wind movement. But those would kind of give you a grounding in some of the ideas, especially the ones that are artists that we talked about already. So there's a long history in this whole area in sculpture and art that's really interesting. So I hope you guys are able to engage with it and make some interesting work. I believe that you can. If you get stuck, then go back to the drawing board and try different pieces and materials, and then don't be afraid to have mistakes and come back and think about it then again and change your materials out. But it's going to be really interesting work, and I think that at the end of it, you will feel like you really accomplished something to do with motion, and kind of has a fun, funny aspect to it, as well as can say a lot about the world and what we're thinking about. There's a whole bunch of people doing this right now with COVID-19. If you go to rubegoldberg.com, the guy, his estate, because he's passed away now, has competitions for this as well. So it's kind of a thing that's happening, or has been happening, I should say, with COVID-19. Once COVID-19 is over, maybe it won't be happening so much. But in the world of now, in the consciousness of people in this time era, in this era, post COVID-19, in COVID-19, then it's kind of on people's in the minds as how do you keep yourself busy when you're stuck at home. So that'll probably be something that will be lasting with us for quite some time, because a lot of people have been through this intense experience. Okay, I hope you guys are staying well out there and taking care of yourselves. If you have questions, please feel free to use the question and answer cafe and reach out to me, message me, all the different ways you can contact me. All right, bye.